Jace here at Black Ovis. Merry Christmas from all of us. So we're winding down here. We're just a couple days away from Christmas. I have a rifle set up here in front of us. Hopefully you're going to get that optic that you've been wanting from Santa this year. And you may already have a scope that is present on your current rifle, but you're going to need to make some changes and put the new optic in place. Now, I've always said if I want something done right, I like to do it myself. And that's where this video comes in. We're going to really try to break it down at a very basic level on what we go through, the steps, the how-tos, the don'ts on mounting a rifle optic and doing it the right way. This is a Browning X-Bolt and a 270 Winchester here in front of me. Just a good all-around hunting caliber for out west here. Big thing that I kind of want to talk about is we are going to level this up as if we were shooting long range with it. Make sure that the action is level and perpendicular to the actual optic. So we'll talk about that more in detail here, but let's dive into it. So here in front of me, like I say, Browning X-Bolt 270. Let's make sure it's clear before we start working on it here. And I do have the old ring bases still mounted to this. So first things first, we're going to actually pull the old rings off. We're going to inspect our bases, make sure we have thread locker on them, make sure our threads look good, just some basic things like that. So tune in here for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pull these off and we'll go from there. Okay, so I wanted to kind of break down the tools that we're using here today. So like I say, we're working on an X-Bolt. We already had an aluminum weaver style base on this. You know, you could be working on a one piece. In fact, this is just a two piece, a lightweight aluminum base here. It's going to work good for the application today. We're going to be mounting up this Vortex Viper HS. This is the 4-16 by 44 millimeter objective. So just a good all around hunting optic, has very generous eye relief. Should pair up nicely with this 270 here. So yeah, as far as the rings go, another Vortex product, we're looking at the Pro Series rings. I have two different heights set out. We'll get more into that, kind of what my thought process is when I go to select the height for my ring. But we have a medium here and we have a low here, both in a 30 millimeter main tube diameter, obviously. Some of my tools here, so I have my fix-it sticks sitting here. Rad setup. We are going to be carrying these here at Black Ovis. There's an unlimited torque wrench here, meaning it's not set to a specific torque setting, excuse me. So it's good for 0 to 65 inch-pounds, which is going to do 90+% of the work on any rifle. It does come with the majority of your common bits found in your rings, bases, other common stock screws and whatnot. Has a large hex wrench here too, so for some of your cantilever mounts and whatnot on AR-15s, it includes that. Rad little T-handle here. It's got a little floating bearing in the center, so as I'm working on stuff, it just kind of makes it quicker to twist and turn. On the back side here, it does have an extra little spot. They actually build an 18 inch-pound torque-specific torque wrench, and this little guy is the perfect torque setting for Vortex, Loophole, a bunch of different scope manufacturers on the market. It's perfect torque setting, so you don't have to worry about over torquing, and we'll get more into that as we start to mount this optic here. You are going to want a level set. This is the Wheeler Level Pro set. Phenomenal set of levels. I've literally had these for probably 7-8 years now and mounted countless numbers of optics, and they still look like new, function like new. You know, you're going to be a little bit to invest in these tools, but it's no less than going out to eat a couple times and you're going to have everything you need to function and work on your rifle scopes and optics in the future. This is another cool product from our friends over at Wheeler. This is a torque wrench. As you can see, I've used mine a bunch. It's got some wear and tear on it. It's their fat wrench, to be specific. It does have an adjustment knob here in the bottom of it, and you can adjust all the way up to 60+ inch-pounds of torque setting, and it does come with a lot of the common bits. So kind of depending on what you prefer here, these are both great options. I actually love this fix-it stick it goes with me in my backpack. So if I did have a catastrophic failure on a backpacking hunt and I need to remount my optic, check my zero, and be back in the game, I could do that with this little setup. It's dang near the size of a wallet when it's all zipped up. Super cool. So check those out if you're looking for kind of more of a mobile setup. And then, you know, the fat wrench, I find myself using it when I'm at home in my shop setting, in my man cave or whatnot, working on my setup. So, but yeah, any questions you have on these tools, you can always call into our customer service team. We'll help you, guide you in the right direction and get you the setup for you. But yeah, let's dive into this. So I have already removed my previous bases. In this case, I'm glad we did. Not only is it dirty, but there's no thread locker present in these action screw holes. So it's not a matter of if, it's when you're going to have an issue and start to, you know, deal with vibration of the recoil of the rifle, or maybe you're riding a side-by-side or an ATV in the mornings. Like, it was bound to happen eventually. These bases were going to loosen up over time. So I'm glad we looked at it. We're going to go ahead and clean this up. I have just some rubbing alcohol here. I have a Q-tip. And I have just a paper towel here. I'm gonna wipe down the old oil, the old grease, and I'm also going to take and actually degrease the insides of these screw holes so that the thread locker binds good to the action. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Stick around with us here. Next step is we're going to apply a thread locker to these. It doesn't take much, just a small drop in each of these screw holes. Obviously, make sure you get the correct thread locker. This is the blue formula. This doesn't require heat or excessive torque when you go to remove it. Obviously, you may change, go to a one-piece slope base or something down the road. You do not want to have the issue of breaking screw heads off inside of here, as well as we're going to talk about the proper torque settings on this as well, so you don't have issues and you or your gunsmith can't get them off and you have to have, you know, new action screws drilled and tapped and stuff. It's just not a fun day. So stick with me here. We'll give a little drop here on each of these screw holes. The other thing I like to do is I really like to inspect my bases. So let's say I did have a screw that was loose, or a couple screws that was loose, and there was some slop, or maybe some slop in the recoil lug of my ring. You know, if that was bouncing back and forth in there under the recoil of the rifle, and you have some screw holes that are now, you know, oblong shaped, or this recoil lug is no longer squared off, you're going to want to replace your bases. Now, these are a lightweight aluminum base, but thankfully a 270 doesn't have a ton of recoil, and everything seemed to be torqued down to spec, so it looks fine, but it's just something to pay attention to. I also like to look at the threads on my actual screw, so make sure that your screws have you know, good fine cut threads. There's nothing that's been stripped out from either the action or the actual threads pulled off of the screw. I mean, this is just little things to look at, but could prevent a catastrophe in the field. So everything looks good here. I kind of cleaned up my screws as well with some of the alcohol, made sure they're good to go. I have my Loctite, my thread locker in each of these holes here, and I'm going to go ahead and reinstall my bases. One key thing here, you're going to see me get my torque wrench out. We're looking for 15 inch-pounds to 25 inch-pounds. Now that depends on the action. This is a steel action, so I'm going to lean towards more of that 25 inch-pounds. We are dealing with a flathead screw though, so we don't have as much meat or as much surface area to work with as if you were using a Torx bit or an Allen head, so you do have to be careful. Having the proper fit flat head that fits inside of this is key too. You can see all the different bits I have to select from, so I'm going to make sure that I grab the perfect one that fits this perfectly. So stick with us here, we're going to get these mounted up. All right, so we go ahead and we have these finger tight now. Next step is we're gonna torque them down to spec. Now, I like to think of this as similar as when I'm putting new rotors on a vehicle. I'm gonna go in a cross pattern so that none of these screws has more tension on it than another one. So you'll notice that as I torque these down, I'm gonna go a little here, come over to the other side a little here, back and forth. Now, not all bases have 4 screws. Many of them only have, 2 in the front, 2 in the rear. So, but just equal tension so that you ensure that you're not putting more torque on one side of the base or the other, and you're getting good even pressure as you go ahead and mount that. So follow along here. I'll go ahead and mount that up. I'm going to use the fat wrench for this job. I'm going to set it right about 20 inch-pounds, and just keep in mind these get you dang close. Always err on, don't go too heavy. I like to kind of hover the bottom edge of that line, unless you spend serious money on a really, really high-end torque wrench. These are gonna be plenty accurate for 99% of the things you're gonna do on a rifle. So I'm gonna start with this screw here. Jump over to my other side. Jump over to my other side. And you notice I haven't torqued them all the way down yet. I'm just going a little at a time. There was my first one that I hit torque to. So we're getting to where they're all gonna break over and have good even tension on them. And maybe my OCD, but I like to go around one more time and just make sure that they're all torqued to the same setting here. So we're gonna repeat the process on the rear. Go ahead, should all be about there now. Everything feels good. So on to the next step. So we have our bases installed. Obviously I said we're gonna mount this optic up perpendicular to the action. So the process is gonna be no different than if you were mounting a long range hunting optic or a long range, and maybe you're shooting PRS, NRL series. You gotta make sure that that crosshair is in fact level to the action. As you travel up and down on your top elevation turret, if that isn't tracking perfectly up and down and you're tracking left or right, you're gonna see lefts and rights at distance. It may not be super obvious when you're shooting, in that medium range and closer, but as you reach out there, you're gonna start to see it trail one way or another. Now, we're not gonna be mounting an exterior level on this. This is gonna be a pretty basic hunting rifle for, I would say, 400 or 500 yards and in, but if you were going to be shooting, long range, you would definitely want to install an exterior level as well. So we'll have future videos on that, going over the details doing that. So we're gonna go ahead and get our action leveled here and mount the other level here on the barrel and make sure they match one another, and kind of explain that as we do it. So you obviously gotta have a good level position on the actual rifle itself. If you're running a Picatinny mount or a Weaver style base, they typically all have a nice level spot for the level to sit. Thankfully, this one does. If you run into issues where you don't have that, it becomes a lot more difficult. You can use the raceway of the action, and there's some other things like that you can do, but this is gonna be pretty simple here. I do have a bipod mounted in the front of here, so it holds tension on the gun and I'm able to level it. You guys don't have to have a super fancy setup to be mounting your own optics. You go into a lot of sporting goods stores and they have a great big extensive vise to mount the gun in. Yes, it makes your life easier. If you were doing it for a living every single day, you would want that, but for occasional rifle of your own arsenal, you don't need that. I just have a bipod with a swivel in the front and then my rear shooting bag here, and it works great. I mount a lot of optics this way. I sometimes use my front mount, or my front rest as well. But you'll see this works pretty dang good for most of your basic mounts. And I have a bipod on most of my rifles, and they're actually really easy to move around too. So as I get this level, I'm gonna go ahead and start to add tension to my bipod. And my table here is not ideal. It kind of has some wiggle to it, but we're gonna make it work. So I would call that pretty dang level. We have the ability to fine tune it here. So once I put my front level on the barrel, there's a micro adjust knob, and we'll make sure we get it perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and put this front mount on here. like to slide it on here just in front of the stock somewhere. When I'm first thread these on, I like to try to get it as close as possible, but like I said, there is a micro adjust knob, so most important thing is just get it nice and snug so you don't bump yourself and have to start over once we're in the middle of the mount here. Starting to get some tension on it, so go ahead and snug those up. And then at this point, I'm going to try not to touch my table here. Get that about as dead even as I can, and then I can turn this little fine knob here and it will help me bump that level one way or the other. So we're finally seeing it perfectly. That looks pretty dang close. So at this point, we aren't going to need this level anymore until our actual optic is mounted on the gun. So we can set that aside. We're going to leave this one. Be careful when you're working around your gun. You don't tip it over or bump this, or like I said, you will have to take your rings off, start from square one again and re-level. So just be cautious of it. If you're helping somebody else, you know, set your eye relief and stuff, make sure you make them aware of that they don't bump that as well. So next up, we're going to pick our rings out. So like I said, I've got two different sets of Pro Series. The packaging's just changed, same ring, really good ring for the money. I don't think every rifle needs a $300 set of rings. These are a killer price point, and we mount a lot of optics with them and don't have any issues with them. So when I go to select a height, you know, on this gun, I know for a fact that the mediums are going to clear, but I always like to mount my optic as low as possible to the rifle. It just, you know, on a traditional hunting stock like we have here with a drop in the comb, it's going to give me the most comfortable cheek weld as possible. And, you know, I'm not going to have to do something fancy with a cheek rest or a cheek riser in the back. It's going to feel good just right out of the gate. So to kind of verify that, I've got the optic here. I'm going to go ahead and pull the lens covers off. And I just kind of like to eyeball it. You know, looking at this, I want to make sure that no part of the scope is going to touch the action, touch my bolt knob, anything like that. You know, just to kind of confirm it, I like to slide my bolt to the forward position and set my scope on there. I am pretty dang close back here on the back with this with the top of the bolt knob here. So I may opt to go the medium in this case. And if I get it on there and I decide it's too high, I can always switch it. But it brings up a good point. You know, when you're sitting at home and you're looking to order your rings, you may not know. You may be like, well, I hope this is right. Call us. We've mounted enough optics here. We've worked with a ton of different rifle brands, manufacturers, scope configurations. You know, 99.9% of the time, we can get it right the first time for you, and hopefully prevent you from having to return a ring or vice versa. So just call us. We're happy to help there. I'm going to opt for the medium in this case, and I think I'm pretty confident it's not going to be too tall, and it's going to be a good, comfortable fit. So let's go ahead and get these unboxed, and we'll go from there. All right, so we went ahead and disassembled the first ring. I took the top cap off, pulled those 4 screws, and loosened my clamp that's going to actually clamp onto the base here. So next thing, we're going to actually go ahead and drop these on. Obviously, make sure your recoil lug lines up with the base. You can quickly check that, you know, wiggle it back and forth, make sure it's got a good bite on there. And I'm going to just finger tighten these screws, and obviously we'll torque these to spec as well. So finger tight's good for now. Disassemble my other ring here, pop these screws out. Okay, so our bases are finger tight. Next step here is we're going to apply torque. Now, you guys saw me use the fat wrench earlier. I kind of want to show off the fix-it sticks and how this unlimited torquer works. So you can see the laser etched marks here on the side, you know, kind of showing me my increments in inch pounds. This particular base is aluminum, so we want to keep that in mind. We're not going to be torquing these to 50 inch-pounds like we could on possibly a steel base. So we're going to shoot for around that 20 to 25 inch-pound mark. Somewhere right in there is going to get us real close to where we want to be. So go ahead and snap my bit in there, put my little T-handle on there. Kind of cool. This T-handle's got spots to accept a bit in all ends. So you'll find certain times it's nice to have the leverage of the longer arm here. So I'm going to go ahead and start my torque. Same thing. I'm gonna, start a little on the front, a little on the back, a little on the front, a little on the back. Hopefully, ending somewhere in that 20 to 25 inch-pound area. Okay, so those are torqued. Okay, so our bases of our rings are torqued down onto the actual bases at this point. We're ready to set our optic in there and install the top caps. So I'm gonna go ahead, place the optic in here. We're not gonna tighten anything. We want it to be loose so we can adjust this. You do have to be careful. Not all rings fit nice and smoothly like these do. So if you're trying to slide it, you can scratch the body of your scope. So just be aware, be careful. If you're noticing that things aren't fitting as smoothly as you would like, make sure that you don't try to slide your scope. The other thing too, and these are not going to fit completely flush to one another. There's going to be a gap present on both sides, and there's some fancy ways to get them perfect and whatnot. If you want to take business card or something and stick it in there and get them perfect, you can do that. I find if I visually watch it, I can really make it look nice and clean. I'm not sure that it honestly matters from a performance standpoint. You just want to make sure that you've got that main tube of the actual optic torqued down to spec so that that surface area is grabbing as much as possible and you're not going to have issues with your scope sliding under recoil. A lot of people ask, well, why don't you go and lap these rings, and those of you that don't know lap, you actually grind material out of the center so the surface area increases. It is an extra step, and there are some rings that it does benefit. If you buy good rings, you don't necessarily have to do that because they are machined to a tolerance where they're already going to have an insane amount of grip on the actual main tube of the scope. So you can see I'm just getting all the screws installed here. Close but not tight. Everything's still loose, free floating, so that I can now take and move this, if I need to, back and forth. So next step, we're gonna set eye relief. Okay, so we have our top caps installed on our rings here with our scope sitting in there. Now's a good time to visually inspect the optic, make sure we have plenty of clearance here. I went with the medium ring in this case. We do have plenty of clearance. The low, it was very close in some spots, and that becomes an issue when the rifle's under recoil and things are vibrating. It's all about harmonics and shifting, and you do not ever want to have an issue with your barrel coming in contact with the bottom of your scope here underneath the objective lens, or it even could be back here on the eyepiece. So you just want to make sure that you have plenty of a clearance. Also, a couple key spots to look at here. So you have your turret section here of your rifle optic, and you have basically this ramp up to your turrets, and then also on the eyepiece side and the objective lens side. You do not want to have those bump into the ring in any way. Under recoil, if something were to slip, it could ruin your scope, or if it's under tension, when you go to tighten everything down, that scope ring's not going to be holding to the level it should be, and it's also going to cause issues with accuracy. You can see your point of impact shift, things like that. So just make sure, you can see here, I've got a pretty generous gap here. We're going to set the eye relief on this. I'm going to actually shoulder the rifle now, and I'm going to set the eye relief and make sure that once I kind of settle on the perfect spot for me, that I'm not dealing with any issues here. So when you do set your eye relief, this is a 4 to 16 power magnification range. 4 power is going to give you the most generous eye relief, or in other words, the largest eye box to where I don't get any scope shadow around the edge. The problem is a lot of people will set their optic up with their lower magnification range, and they will never check their high magnification, and they find that it's set up way too, the scope's too far away. They have to lean into it. It's uncomfortable. They're putting a lot of torque onto the stock and things like that to see that full picture. So I just recommend check it at low power, check it at high power, and make sure that you have plenty of range in there. Think about it when you're the time of year you're hunting. If you're going to be using, you know, a big puffy coat or any issues like that, like it can change everything. So we're not always going to be in a t-shirt where we're hunting, and you know, you just want to set it up for the actual hunt, not for those range days that are perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn this up right now. I've already checked it at 4 power. I'm going to turn this up to 16 power, and I'm going to go ahead and shoulder that. I like to kind of close my eyes, get a comfortable natural position on the stock, and then open my eyes and make sure that I have that good perfect view. Like I said, this scope has a very generous eye relief, and I do have a pretty good view, but I find that if I tip my head back just ever so slightly, I lose view there. So I'm going to actually come back on this scope just a little bit. Make sure that I'm still keeping a healthy gap in between my front ring here and the bell of the objective. And when I throw that up there, yeah, I mean, I only came back maybe a little over 1/4 inch, and now it just feels super natural. I've got some give one way or the other. I'm pretty confident that even if I'm in a big, you know, hooded jacket or hoodie, or, you know, the other thing to think about is we're not always shooting perfect condition standing with a good cheek weld and everything. I may be down an extreme angle or laying down prone, and those types of things always come in. But you can check those at your house as well. If you want to lay down and actually get into it before you tighten it up, I recommend doing that because you can't ever prepare too much. So we're going to go ahead and get this scope level now. All right, so you know, we have our eye relief set here. Feels good for me. And you know, the person that's getting this for Christmas is actually going to be similar build to me. So we're banking on it a little bit. We can always adjust it if we need to. We're going to level this up now. So we obviously still have our level present here that is level to the action, and we want this crosshair to be perpendicular to the actual action as well. So this level that we used earlier, we're going to go ahead and put it on top of our turret cap here. You know, we can see that we definitely need to bump it a little bit here. It's pretty close right there. I'm going to go ahead and just apply a little bit to the screw to maybe snug it up there, and then I'm going to double check one other thing. So now that I have the turret cap close, I like to check the actual turret itself too. I know for a fact these Viper HSs have a nice flat spot on the turret. Not all turrets are nice and flat like that, but I like to go ahead and put that on there, and they match nicely. So at this point, we're going to start to torque all of our screws down, just finger tight, and I'm going to watch these gaps on the side, make sure that the gaps stay as equal as possible, so aesthetically it looks super nice. You know, with this top cap being an over the top, you do have to be careful because as you tighten these screws, it can shift the body of the scope one way or the other. So I really pay attention a lot to the levels when I'm doing this. You know, I want to ensure that the finished product is as level as it is right now. So just kind of tightening up these screws as we go, watching my gaps. They all look really good. At that point, I can't get it any tighter with my fingers. Our levels still read nice and true. And we're going to go ahead and flip over to the T-wrench, and I'm going to grab this 18-inch pound torque wrench here. Cool thing about Vortex rings, if you forget, it's actually laser etched right on the side of it, 18-inch pounds. So super convenient. Same thing like we did with the bases. We're going to do a crisscross pattern. So a little bit there, a little bit there. Just continue around as I do this crisscross pattern. Eventually I'm going to start applying enough torque that I'm going to hit the torque limiter. You can hear it, this one's kind of a quiet click compared to the fat wrench. Extremely quiet. We're going to go to the front one here. Same thing, I'm going to start crisscross pattern. You can hear that little tick. Hitting that torque limiter. Double check them all. Looks good. Final step here, moment of truth. Our levels still look money, so that's great. So at this point, our optic is mounted. It's torqued down to spec. Rings are torqued to spec. You know, we have a thread locker on our base screws. Everything's ready to rock and roll. The final step here is we want to get it on paper, and we're going to do a basic bore sight that you can do in the comfort of your house. You don't need a bunch of extensive tools. It works best on a bolt action rifle because I can use the bolt, pull it out, and actually look through the bore, and we're going to center up a dot. So stick around. We're going to go through that process next. I'm just going to slap this right next to that. Okay, so final step of this is obviously a bore sight. Nobody wants to go waste a couple boxes of ammo to get on paper. Now, I have to, you know, raise this up a bunch due to some limitations of our studio. I have a little wall I'm looking over here, but the way it was sitting before is just fine for this. I'm gonna go ahead and take my level off here. I put a sticker on the wall right about 20 yards away, so not super far. You don't need, you know, 100 yards like everybody thinks to bore sight a rifle. I'm gonna go ahead and remove my bolt. So I have obviously removed the bolt here. I'm gonna center the sticker in the center of the bore. And the idea is I don't have to touch the rifle in any way once I get this set. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Got it pretty close. Nice thing about this is I can adjust my rest here and get it exactly where I need it. You know, those of you that don't have a rear rest, you can use, you know, really like some sandbags or whatever you have at the house. Get creative, but a rifle rest definitely makes this easier. Once I have that centered in the bore, I'm not going to touch the rifle at all. I'm going to go straight to my scope here, and I'm going to look. So my crosshair is sitting a little bit high and left. We're really close. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loosen my turrets here, my caps, excuse me. We're going to expose that windage and elevation turret there. I'll look through one more time, make sure I didn't bump it. Still looks very close. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the needed adjustments on this scope at this point to get my crosshair centered. It's extremely close. I like to double check my bore one more time, make sure I didn't bump that. And that's really close. Now, I realize this is not perfect, but no bore sighting is perfect. It's all just a way to get you on paper when you go to the range the first time. You're not wasting ammunition, you know, trying to just find where your bullet's hitting. I recommend starting your paper somewhere around 25 or 50 yards. You could still use the nicest bore sighter in the world and go to 100 yards and still miss the paper and be wasting ammunition, and prices of ammo nowadays is through the roof, as we all know. So I hope this helps. This is a very basic scope mount. You know, you're going to be extremely accurate with this setup. Torquing everything to specs is going to ensure that you're not going to have any issues with, you know, oblonging the body of the tube or anything like that. And it's going to last for years of use and abuse in the backcountry. So tune in. Again, we're going to have lots of these rifle series videos coming up. Hopefully make you a better rifle hunter and a better shooter in general. So thanks for tuning in. Please call into customer service if you have any questions on anything you've seen here today. Thank you.